Вечерва разговараме со еден човек кој што одлично го познава Балканот, кој што е роден во овие краишта, во Тирана, Албанија, но долги години живее во центарот на светската политика во Вашингтон. Добро вечер велам за Адриан Штуни, меѓународен експерт за меѓународна политика и за безбедност, кој што во моментов се наоѓа во Вашингтон. Mr. Штуни, welcome to our show and thank you for agreeing to take part in this discussion about the current politics in the Western Balkans, EU, but also about the future of the region. We have very few chances to discuss with not biased people who knows excellently the region. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us tonight.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be with you.
Okay, I just said in Macedonian language that you are an expert in international relations, international politics, and security. And we have many issues to discuss, especially these days, having, let's say, animosities in the north part of Kosovo. This is only, I would say, 100 kilometers away from Macedonia. So it all scares us in a way, I have to say. If you go further, Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, formally, it's still one more location where give us fear about the future of the region. Macedonia-Bulgaria relations, it's a specific part. The fear of great countries, big countries in the Balkans is always a fear, another one. So I would start with one issue that it's not being discussed regularly due to the previous mentioned issues, but which is present danger, I would say, the issue of returnees of the fighters that were fighting for ISIS in the Middle East, and which are now most of them back, and they are kind of present here, but nobody is talking about them. You're a person who is closely following this development. I would say again, this danger for the Balkans. So, should we be afraid of these people who are here and of their circles? I would say, which they are part of.
That's a very good question. I would not use the word afraid. I would use the word aware and prepared. So I agree with you. We need to talk a lot more about this problem. It is a sensitive issue because it also has inside it an ethnic component, and in multi-ethnic countries, this is also always a sensitive issue to discuss. But I think it is in the benefit of everyone. It's the benefit of the stability of the country and security of the whole country to discuss openly and honestly about these issues, because if a terrorist attack happens, it will not distinguish between ethnicities, and it will hurt the economy of the country equally, independently of whether you are an ethnic Macedonian, ethnic Albanian, ethnic Turk, whatever. This is why there's no other issue that should bring everyone to the table to discuss and to find solutions, not to just discuss. Because sometimes the problem is there's a lot of talk, but there's very little actually done. So I think that to get back to the specifics of your question, there's about 560 individuals that have returned to the Balkans, who have spent some time in Syria and Iraq, either directly or indirectly in contact with terrorist organizations like the Islamic State or Jabhat al-Nusra. This is a huge concern. These are big numbers for a small region like the Balkans. 1,070 individuals are known to have left from the Balkans or from the diaspora of the Balkans to join these terrorist organizations. And from this 1,070 that have gone, there's been hundreds of children born there, of at least one parent from the Balkans, the contingent of individuals from the Balkans who have spent some time embedded with these terrorist organizations is about 1,400, if you include the children that were born over there. Now, this is a huge problem because the numbers are pretty big. And I'll give you a comparison. And why am I saying this? There's been 1,070 individuals from the Balkans, a population of 19 million, okay? And there's been about 5,000 who have left from Western Europe, a population of over 500 million. So if you do the math, you'll see that the Western Balkans has 6 times the rate of radicalization, recruitment, and mobilization into terrorist organizations compared to the Western Europe, 6 times, which means that the equivalent, had they had in Western Europe the same rate of radicalization, recruitment, and mobilization, they would have had a number of 30,000 live from Western Europe to go to Syria and Iraq to join terrorist organizations. So that is a major concern, and this did not happen overnight. So we need to ask hard questions about what happened and what are the socioeconomic, political factors and ideological components that drove this huge number of people to go to join terrorist organizations in Syria and Iraq.
My question would be more specifically addressed to the capacities of the countries in the Western Balkans to accept those people. I know about the process of de-radicalization in Macedonia, for instance. There are certain foreign funds that are supporting the families and the returnees itself to reintegrate in the societies. As far as I'm informed about this situation, the results are still very vague. The results are not really, let's say, successful. So how can the countries in the Balkans cope with all these returnees when they have their own problems? Especially in the last 2-3 years, we have now energy crisis, financial crisis, we have a food crisis, if you like. We have the crisis with the relations with the European Union for the 6 countries in the Western Balkans that are mostly targeted by those people. So what is the solution? The countries should have some coordinated efforts among themselves, because let's be honest, Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania, Southern Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have some links. If you like, Open Balkan is one of the projects that can fight this situation, or the main step should be undertaken by the US and European Union, because the whole region might be not stable if there is no result in this fight.
So you asked me probably like 3 or 4 questions in that one. No, the point I'm trying to make is everything is interconnected here. You cannot fight one problem without addressing another, and you always have to be mindful that the resources are very limited in the Balkans, because there's so many transnational threats that are converging. And that is a different, remember to ask me the question about the convergent international threats, and I will ask that, because that's important, and will give you an indirect answer to what I'll give now, which is going to be a direct answer to the main question: what can be done with returnees and who should do it? I think there should be a country by country effort, and there should be a regional effort. Why? Because these problems are not country specific. These are transnational problems. These are regional problems. And the networks of people who radicalized, recruited, and mobilized these individuals, they were not concerned with borders. Their ideology is not concerned with borders. This is all about the big Ummah. This is about creating a caliphate. This is about creating a new identity, creating a new reality, which goes beyond flags of nations and languages and borders. So in order to fight something like this, in order to counter it, you need to have a concerted effort. You need to have platforms that will target the problem from a regional perspective. That is also the case because not even one country in the Balkans has the necessary resources to counter this problem by themselves. Okay? And as you've seen, for example, there has been terrorist attempts that were foiled. For example, one that was foiled in Albania when the Israel team was supposed to come and play with Albania. And the group of people mainly was from Kosovo that were going to carry out the terrorist attack, which shows that you have a group of people operating in one country that are going to carry out a terrorist attack in another country. So without cooperation and information sharing between law enforcement agencies, it's going to be it's going to be impossible. It's going to be very hard to actually be effective against these problems, because these networks are transnational. These networks are well organized. And I also wanted to say one more thing. I think it is short-sighted to think that these are poor people who are not educated, who don't have a job, who don't have any means. It's not true. I mean, some of them are uneducated, but some of them are very well educated. Some of them are unemployed, but some of them have businesses. So this idea that, okay, you know what, let's package it this way. Let's say that this is because of poverty. This is because of unemployment, lack of employment opportunities. Let's say it's about that. I think it's a lie. And it's not going to go well if we continue to lie to ourselves. This is about an ideology that has been spread in the Balkans for decades after the fall of socialism, communism, what have you, and the wars in the Balkans. The situation was volatile. The situation was such that allowed and enabled people from organizations from the Middle East primarily to come in the Balkans and to do whatever they wanted, to spread Wahhabism and to spread Salafi jihadism, and to take hundreds, if not thousands, of talented and smart youth from the Balkans and take them to Middle East to be educated and indoctrinated, actually, because that was not education in itself, indoctrinated in the Middle East, and then bring them back to the Balkans, where they've opened their own be it cultural associations or whatever they call them, charities, and that's where they have started spreading this ideology that with the war starting in Syria and Iraq, it galvanized these movements of people who left for Syria and Iraq to join terrorist organizations. And don't forget one thing: these people went there in some cases with their children. You have to have a very high level of commitment to an ideology to sacrifice the life of your children. So this doesn't happen. You wake up one day and you say, okay, I'm going to go there because I want to live under Sharia law and all that stuff. So you need to think about these things. And if we're looking at court documents, because I've looked at court documents of people who've been repatriated and were investigated and were found guilty, very rarely would you find someone who was self-radicalized. They were all members of groups before they left to Syria and Iraq, and they left with a group of people, which means that the level of organization of these groups is very high, and they know exactly what they're doing, and this is why there needs to be a higher level of concern about these problems.
Yes, a friend of mine, former Western diplomat in Skopje, once told me recently, it sounds like a joke, but it's not a joke. Like, I pray if something happens from the returnees from ISIS, that they will target Muslims in Kosovo, Albania, or Macedonia, South Serbia, because if they target the other religious groups, then it might add to the current divisions in the Balkans, and that one religious group, let's say Orthodox, might blame the whole Muslims for these attacks. And it is, again, it sounds like a joke, but it really might add to the complicities of the region.
I hope nothing actually happens, because any terrorist attack, as I mentioned, that might target any section of the population in the Balkans is going to have devastating effects on, the social fabric of these countries, the economy of these countries, security, without any dispute. But it is true that the balances, the interethnic dynamics in certain specific countries are more sensitive, and there could be, as you said, repercussions that are very difficult to handle and to rein in if they happen. So I am really concerned, and this is why we cannot think that the problem of violent extremism and terrorism is gone now that ISIS is defeated on the battlefield. Yes, ISIS is defeated in the battlefield, but not their ideology. Their ideology continues, and the networks that radicalized and recruited people are still there and operating, be that on the ground or online. All you need to do is just go online. If you know where to look, you will see that there is a lot of there's big groups of people in the Balkans who are exchanging and disseminating this ideology and supporting these groups. And this is why there needs to be a concerted effort, as I mentioned, because, and I'm going to say another thing, right? So the people who left to go to Syria and Iraq, they are part of the problem, but in real terms, they are a symptom of the problem. They're not the actual problem. The actual problem are the ones who radicalize them, and the ones that radicalize them never left. Most of them are still there. Some of them are in prisons and will leave will come out very soon. And even the ones who returned, because the sentences in the Balkans for returnees who have fought in Syria and Iraq are very short sentences. For example, North Macedonia, I think it is probably 6.4 years, if I'm not mistaken. I did a study about this. But then compare it to other countries. So for example, for similar crimes in European Union, you get an average of 9 years in prison, right? And for similar crimes in the United States, you get an average of 13 to 14, 13.5 years in prison. So the difference is there. But North Macedonia has actually been sentencing these returnees at a higher level, 6.4. Others, like Bosnia or Kosovo, have put in place much more lenient sentences, going from 2.4 to 3.5 years. And that is a concern because, as I said, these people don't really care much about borders. And if they are released in Skopje, or they are released in Pristina, or they are released in wherever else, Sarajevo, that is a common problem for the Balkans. And this is why the efforts to counter this problem have to be common.
Yes. If you agree, I would move further to the other issues like EU, but it's not inevitable to mix this issue with European Union enlargement. Do you find any link between this danger for the region, but also for the European Union? Because all of these people now in jail, later martyrs, I would say, will be able freely to move to in European Union. Do you find that this is a special problem for the region when talking about enlargement to EU, besides the internal issues of the European Union? Because obviously, as you just pointed out right now, and we all know that the Balkans is still kind of a returnee hub for the former and current members of ISIS.
It is a concern. It is a security concern that this is not a surprise. Obviously, the numbers are high in terms of returnees, and European Union countries have decided not to repatriate foreign fighters or people who they know were engaged in combat with terrorist organizations. So, of course, they are wary. They're concerned of these individuals coming back. But it's not just the foreign fighters, right? I think also family members are concerned, not necessarily because they might pose a security risk, but because they are traumatized, because they've been in a war setting for a very long time. And some of them are deeply indoctrinated, unfortunately. But children, I mean, let's put this very clearly out there. Children are victims. There's no debate about that. Because children did not decide to go there by themselves. They are the victims of who? They are the victims of their own parents. And there is no worse situation than to be the victim of your own parent. The victim of the people that are supposed to keep them safe, the victim of the people who are supposed to teach them the right things, have made them unsafe and have taught them and put them in danger, have taught them the worst things possible. So that is why we need to be particularly careful with children and give them all the support that we can, because they are traumatized and because they are the victims. They're twice victims, not only because they've gone to Syria and Iraq and they've experienced what they've experienced, but because they've been the victims of the people that should care the most about them. But then when it comes to women and all those individuals who go through the prison sentence, through the prison system, there should be programs to de-radicalize or at least to disengage them, to offer them a path to reintegration, rehabilitation. So far, I've seen some timid efforts that are not well funded. Everything, if not, I mean, most things, if not everything, depends on foreign donors. It's very hard to plan and be effective and successful if everything depends on what somebody decides to give you. You cannot plan that way. So there needs to be more funding dedicated to rehabilitating and reintegrating the returnees. Because in essence, returning and repatriating these people, it's the right thing to do. It's an obligation by the countries. These are nationals of the specific countries in the Balkans. But you cannot just think that you can bring them back and they will rehabilitate themselves, because too much has gone on, and it's a major concern.
Yes, разговараме со Адриан Штуни, експерт за меѓународна политика и безбедност. Продолжуваме со разговорот поврзан со состојбите во регионот, но и со состојбите со повратниците од ИСИС, веднаш по рекламите. Го продолжуваме разговорот со Адриан Штуни, човек што е роден во Тирана, Албанија, но долги години живее во САД, во моментов во Вашингтон, меѓународен експерт за меѓународна политика, би рекол, и безбедност. Во првиот дел од емисијата разговаравме за повратниците и, реков, условно речено, опасноста од присуството на луѓе кои што претходно се бореле во ИСИС, во Сирија, во Ирак, а сега се тука некаде меѓу нас во Македонија, на Косово, Албанија, Босна и Херцеговина, Србија и така натаму и така натаму. Во вториот дел продолжуваме да разговараме за едно од главните прашања што се сега актуелни, а тоа е корупцијата. Adrian, we have been discussing about the issue of returnees from ISIS. Now I would like to tackle upon another very active issue, I would say. I remember the President Biden has underlined the issue of corruption in his last executive order, targeting Western Balkans, talking about Western Balkans. Recently, we have had a statement from the American ambassador, new American ambassador in Skopje, Angela Aguilar, that the corruption is the outmost issue, and that the Americans, I would say directly, would target former and current members of the establishment of the government who are dealing with corruptions. I don't recall that any other U.S. ambassadors, even the EU ambassadors in the region, have so openly said that one country is not capable of fighting the corruption and that the corruption is poisoning the whole society. This is the main dilemma in Macedonian society right now. Is this some political maneuver by the American administration, or this is a real will and plan really to tackle upon the corruption in the country and in the region, I guess?
I believe that it is not a maneuver of any sort. I think it's in the best interest of the countries of the Balkans to tackle this gangrene that has been eating away at the prosperity and stability of the countries in the whole region. And corruption is endemic across the Balkans. It is important to emphasize, I think you mentioned it, that Biden administration has established the fight against corruption as a core U.S. national security interest, which means corruption hurts U.S. national security, and we need to do something. And it's not something that is an option, it's something that is a priority. And this is why this is the official policy of the U.S. government, and this is why this is being done, and not only in North Macedonia, but also in Albania and other places where there has been an increased focus and emphasis on fighting corruption, because corruption is creating major issues, even when it comes to people leaving these countries, the youth leaving these countries and going elsewhere because they're frustrated, because they cannot see the future in these countries. And unfortunately, because countries of the Western Balkans are beautiful, are amazing, are well-resourced, they have, but they're losing the main resource that is going to help a better future come about, the youth. And if you lose the youth, it's a major problem. So I think the U.S. is investing, U.S. government, and through their embassies in the countries of the Balkans is making a very good investment for the people of the region. I hope they keep at it, because corruption, as I said, is a gangrene, and you cannot just forget about corruption.
We have this dilemma here in Macedonia about the real aims of the American administration, because we have witnessed that previously there were also cases of corruption which were not sanctioned by the EU, by the US. Sorry. Recently, we have had a Russian spy, according to the Macedonian president Pendarovsky, and by all relevant sources, who got Macedonian passports approved by the National Secret Service, Agency for National Security. And now the person who put his signature on the Macedonian citizenship for the Russian spy is chosen by the government to be the new head of the National Secret Service. The person who got Macedonian citizenship is on the American blacklist for undermining the American democratic institutions and practically fighting the administration of President Biden. I cannot claim this is a corruption, but how should we get this message from the American ambassador that they will target corruption when in the same days when this statement was given, this person who gave citizenship to Russian spy is being chosen to National Secret Service chief? Again, I'm a little bit maybe complicating the situation, but it seems that the Macedonian government is not afraid to confront US by giving citizenship to Russian spy. Is it corruption or something else?
It's a very good question. I am not sure that I have an answer, but I'll try. And the way I see it is the United States is not a law enforcement agency for North Macedonia. The United States is not going to be the one to fight this problem single-handedly for you. You need to fight it for yourself, which means I'm not talking only about North Macedonia. I'm talking about Albania. I'm talking about Kosovo. I'm talking about all the countries in the Balkans. There might be issues inside certain institutions. You are more well aware of these dynamics that are problematic and corruption. because you live and you live every day and you pay on your own skin all of that, the cost of that corruption. Therefore, I think it is more your duty as a journalist, and you know, not only for towards your profession, but to your country and to your own children. It's a duty to expose these dealings and to fight about a better and more accountable government in North Macedonia and across the Balkans. I think that the United States can help. I think the United States can put pressure, and I think the United States is doing a lot compared to other countries or other partners. But again, this is something that needs to come from the people of North Macedonia, from the institutions of North Macedonia.
Yes. Well, the issue is that we as a journalists have published all the details about this big scandal with the Russian spy, but still the government didn't take our remarks. In addition, we have many situations that are openly corrupted, and the government is not withdrawing. Practically, we came now in a situation that the suspects for corruption, I'm talking about the top high people in the government, should arrest themselves for being corrupted, which is, you will agree, not really feasible. So this is why when you say Americans is not controlling the institution, its country, we should do it ourselves, it's practically impossible. So without strong message and even direct involvement by the American institutions, as it happens a year and a half when DEA took participation in a big drug action, anti-drug action in Macedonia. Otherwise, I don't think we can do it ourselves without the support of the Americans.
I completely understand, and I'm with you. And believe me, as a person who's deeply connected emotionally with the Balkans, I am from the Balkans, although I am an American citizen. I want nothing more than a more intense involvement and engagement of the United States in the Balkans. But you also have to understand that there's so many other countries in the world that have very similar issues to North Macedonia and other countries in the Balkans. Corruption is not unique to the Balkans. There's so much corruption going on, so much organized crime going on all over the world. And therefore, you need to also understand that the resources are limited. The United States is a big country, is a country that cares, and a country that has priorities to, advance democracy and good governance and accountability. But if you start taking over the responsibilities of local governments, then that's not feasible for us. We, as Americans, I don't think the American government has the capability to govern the world as a whole. So I think that the United States government can do so much and does, but in partnership with local governments and local, civil society and other and journalists like yourself who investigate these cases. But I think ultimately, I hope you understand that growth comes from inside. Growth comes from within the country. Awareness comes from within the country, and it's a long road, but you're not alone. The United States is with you, and I think European Union also is helping to some extent.
Yes. I have read several days ago a report by the American institutions about the money spent in the Balkans, actually all over Europe, let's say fragile democratic countries. Money spent by the American institutions to support the NGOs, the media, different parts of the society to tackle corruption, and most of it to tackle influence by other third actors, first of all, Russia and China, I assume. What for Macedonia, for instance, there are, I think, 55 million euros spent. For Albania, 59, sorry, for Serbia 55, Albania 39. I'm asking this because in Macedonia it became a rule by the pro-government media, pro-government propaganda, to blame everybody about certain Russian links if you legitimately criticize the corruption, for instance, and we came in a situation that you cannot criticize the government because immediately you will put on some Russian list that you have links with Russia. So why this situation is not being clarified by the, let's say, Americans, to say, okay, there are some people linked to Russia, maybe China, I know, Saudi Arabia, maybe Iran, etc. But there are some legitimate reasons for criticizing the government because they are doing wrong. Now it seems that every critical voices toward the governments are, let's say, judged by the Americans, if you understand what I'm trying to tell you.
I think corruption is a real issue. I'm not saying anything new here. Everybody knows it. And I think that people who expose corruption should not be intimidated or labeled in any way, because that does not bode well. That does not help the countries, does not help exposing issues, does not help fighting the problem. Actually creates another bigger issue. I think I mentioned it earlier. There's converging challenges and threats. There's many converging challenges and threats in the Balkans. I think corruption is one of the bigger ones because it's tied to organized crime, it's tied to money laundering, it's tied to so many more issues that distort the economy, that frustrate people, that makes them leave their country in despair. I saw the latest polls that came out. The International Republican Institute had done some polling about the situation in Macedonia. I was not very positively impressed when I saw those. I was very concerned when I saw those numbers. If I'm not mistaken, the popularity of European Union is still strong, but it had dropped from 85, I think, to 70 or 72, 73%. That is concerning because at the other end, I saw that there was an increase of support for Turkey and China. And again, we know that they are not exactly the most democratic societies or systems of governance. And I also saw that people had very little trust in government institutions. Very little trust. I'm talking probably was between 20 to 25% of people actually trusted public prosecutors or the court and justice system or the anti-corruption commission that you have there. Even political parties. It was the support for people in parliament was really low. I mean, which means that there is huge problems and people know it. People do not need to be told that you're a Russian spy if you're criticizing the people in public office, because it's pretty obvious that there is major issues of trust. There's major issues with corruption. So the point I'm trying to make is, of course, there's going to be attempts to cover up. And of course, there is some people who work for the Russians. There is no debate about that, even in Macedonia, Northern Macedonia. But I wouldn't be concerned that if you're honest and you are trying to shine a light on corruption, that you are going to be lumped together and somebody is going to say, by definition, you are somebody who doesn't mean well and somebody who is being paid by the enemies or whatever. I think if we're looking at the data, people are aware that there is major issues and they're not trusting these government institutions that much. And therefore, I think much more needs to be done to fight corruption, but also other transnational threats that we can get into.
Yes, sometimes I feel that the government is not publishing those people working for the Russian interest in the country. Obviously, that there are people that are like them, only in order to throw a fog on the overall situation. Because if the government and the Americans publish those people who are linked with Putin, then all of us which are not linked to Putin we will have bigger legitimacy to speak about the current issues. Because normally, we mentioned before $59 million spent in Macedonia for the last 5 years, 2017, 2022. These are money spent, I would say most of them for fighting anti-Russia, anti-China influence in the country. We should know who are these people. The government is not really publishing them just to make a folk, as I said at the beginning. Am I be right or not?
I understand what you're saying, but I think this, in the Balkans in general, this idea that the government should do everything, it's problematic. And it comes from the past where, the socialist mentality where everything needs to be done by the government and the government is responsible, or is somebody else, the United States, European Union. No, I mean, in my view, and I'm probably being a little ruthless here when I say, but I think the problem is that civil society and people and everybody else should have those lists, should make those lists, and should be more proactively engaged in exposing corruption, exposing those people who work against the welfare of the country and against the values that you care about, instead of waiting for the United States or European Union or even the government to expose itself, right? I think there needs to be more activism, there needs to be more awareness, and there needs to be more energy spent by the people who actually want change to happen, instead of expecting change to happen as Deus ex machina. Somebody's going to bring it to you, and somebody's going to give it to you, and somebody is the designated authority to expose all evil and take care of it. I don't think that works that way. You need growth that comes from inside. You need to fight corruption from inside. You will have the support. You will always have the support of the United States, in my view. But you need to do all of this. You need to do it by yourself. I think that's where you will be inoculated, or you will gain immunity from this kind of sicknesses.
Okay, we have time for two more issues. One is Kosovo-Serbia relations, and before we go to the final issue, what is the real threat to the Western Balkans by the Russian and primarily the Russian and Chinese influence? And here we have to have in mind the situation, the double messages sent by the Western partners of Western Balkans. For instance, China State COSCO company bought the Piraeus port. Also, Russian capital is in the Thessaloniki port. Now there is discussion for purchasing of the Chinese COSCO of the Hamburg port. But at the same time, everybody are talking about the Russian and Chinese influence in Macedonia, Kosovo, Albania. Why we are not allowed to discuss even about these links, which might bring some, let's say, economic better situation along with other threats, while other countries can discuss, can accept Chinese investments, can buy Russian oil and gas, etc., etc.
Well, two things. Basically, when it comes to Russia, I think in the context of the war in Ukraine, Russia has come to represent the most significant threat to peace and stability in Europe. This is clear as day. Of course, I understand that mistakes have been made in the past. And this is why, in a certain way, the European Union, some European countries, mostly in European Union, but even outside, are so much dependent on energy resources that come from Russia. And this is where Russia was counting. This is what Russia was counting on, so that it could blackmail and threaten countries in Europe to do nothing about Ukraine because of their dependence from Russian energy sources. So I think that was a mistake on the part of very powerful countries that had the means to do the math. I think they were counting on this interdependency and hoping that Russia was going to behave in a rational way because of its own economic interest. I think Russia chose its imperial ambitions over economic stability and growth, and it's going to pay the price, as it is paying the price, but it's also causing a lot of damage to economies in Europe and obviously even in the Balkans, because the prices have gone up and so on. I think also one thing about Russia has systematically exploited ethno-political tensions in order to disrupt the region's Euro-Atlantic path and to challenge NATO and European Union. It's because in the Balkans, Russia understands that that's where it can punch back against NATO, it can punch back against European Union, and it can create some kind of instability. So it is very concerning that Russia has some influence, even within political parties in some countries in the Balkans. And there are active collaborators with Russia in certain countries in the Balkans. So the Russian influence is not debatable in the countries of the Western Balkans. When it comes to China's economic footprint has grown in the Balkans in the past decade or so. I think it has some 120 or 130 projects going on in the Western Balkans. I think that it is about $35 billion. I mean, the total amount of these investments. And all countries of the Balkans are part of Belt and Road, with the exception of Kosovo, which China does not recognize. It is in a way concerning, this kind of engagement from China, because the Chinese development model is also called the debt trap diplomacy, which means that China funds major infrastructure projects. You've seen it in Montenegro, in countries that are developing, giving them loans which they cannot repay. And then they use these debts to gain leverage over those governments. And that kind of model is problematic, especially when they're investing in strategic sectors of the economy and industry, because they make these investments make these countries vulnerable.
I believe the last question I have for you tonight is closely linked to what we are just talking now. We have witnessed for the last 10 months the disaster in Ukraine, the war, loss of lives and houses, refugees, millions throughout Europe, and simultaneously we are seeing the new danger topic in the I would say not only in the region, in the continent, European continent, but in the world, the North Kosovo. The fight between official Belgrade and Pristina. It seems that we are not learning by the mistakes that are already being done, I would say, recently in the continent.
I am concerned about two things. I think the crisis in Ukraine for sure needs to be addressed. President Zelensky was yesterday here in the United States. He gave a speech in the Congress, and that was a very powerful speech. I think in general, what I wanted to say about the war in Ukraine is about so much more than the Ukrainian land or Ukrainian sovereignty. It is about all of our values and freedom, and the outcome of that war is going to define the future of our world order. And this is the future of the free world, really. So I couldn't agree more with President Zelensky speaking to the Congress yesterday when he said that your money is not charity. He was asking for support, but he said your money is not charity. It's an investment in global security. It is an investment in global security because what's happening there for 10 months now in Ukraine and the Russian unjustified aggression towards Ukraine, it has created instability way beyond Ukraine, and it has created instability even in the Balkans, and it can create further instability because it is weakening the Balkans and it is weakening Europe in general. When it comes to the conflict in Kosovo, the disputes or the instability that is created in Kosovo, I think the situation in northern Kosovo is an open wound, but it's an old open wound. And Pristina and Belgrade need to find the political will to make compromises, implement the agreements they've made. They've made 33 agreements over the past almost 10 years that they have been discussing in Brussels, but 2/3 of those agreements have not been implemented. And finally, they have to agree on the reality on the ground. Kosovo is an independent state. This is the reality, and this reality requires a comprehensive and final solution for normalizing relations in the name of prosperity of both Albanians and Serbs. This is not just for one country or the other, or for one population or the other. And I know that in general we can talk about it, but what is needed? The question is, okay, but what is needed? How can they get there? I think what is needed ultimately is a change in mindset of the parties that are negotiating. Okay, Kurti and Vučić, basically, they are engaged in the dialogue. I don't think that the leaders of Pristina and Belgrade share a common view on what the dialogue is about. And what really needs to happen here is a fundamental change in the way they think about the process. I mean, clearly both sides believe they're righteous. They think that they're right and the other person is wrong. So the dialogue, it's not about something practical. Okay, let's reach an agreement to make things better for both of us, for something tangible. It is not even about pure interest. The parties are making it about something almost spiritual. The Serbs say Kosovo is the heart of Serbia, and things like that. They make it almost religious, or they talk about moral rights. And that's problematic because you cannot reach a deal if you're making the discussion about religion and morals and spirituality. They need to focus on not historic rights, but they need to focus on practical solutions that will help people feel better, that will help people prosper, that will help people stay in the Balkans instead of leave and go to other countries in Europe or elsewhere. Because the countries of the Balkans are bleeding people. They're just, the populations are leaving in droves. Frankly, until the current leaders of both Kosovo and Serbia can set aside these animosities and look towards the future for the sake of their own people, I'm not sure they're going to be able to make any lasting progress. And I hope they will change their views and they'll come to the table with the idea that they need to make the sacrifices for the sake of the future of their own people.
And one more last follow-up question. Many people in the region, especially in the non-Albanian, let's say, societies, they feel Kosovo as a result of the American foreign policy. And now many of us, even me, I might say, we are surprised by the relations between Kurti and official Washington. The official statement by the American administration that Kurti should allow association of Serbian municipalities in the north of Kosovo, and Kurti is against it. So it's kind of not logical. Is Kurti really ready to fight the official Washington, or this is just another game, another play for the public?
I think that, look, it's a difficult way to judge what's in somebody's mind. I can tell you what I see, and I'm telling you that the situation is not positive in Kosovo. I think the latest Franco-German proposal for a new dialogue framework presents a very positive development. I hope that both parties take advantage of this opportunity and sit around the table with a positive attitude to solve issues. with regards to the association of Serb majority municipalities, I would say that that's an agreement that has been made, that's been ratified by the Kosovo Parliament. The Constitutional Court has ruled on it and has said that specifically it needs to be implemented. That's item 2 of the ruling. I have read it. I know exactly. There are issues with the constitutionality of that agreement. Of course, they can be adjusted as needed, but agreements that have been agreed on and time has been spent on that need to be implemented. If they're not implemented, that means that time has been wasted. And nobody's going to accept that, because the international community, when it comes to the United States, but primarily European Union, that has been facilitating these discussions, have spent a lot of time, have spent a lot of energy to get to this point. And so by not implementing the agreements that have already been made, you're eroding what has been achieved, and you're not moving forward. So I think the agreements need to be honored. They need to be implemented, all of them, because 2/3 are not implemented. And that is the best way to get to normalizing the relationships between Serbia and Kosovo. Again, as I said, this is for the benefit of the people. It's not for the benefit of the United States that they need to make concessions to each other. It is for the benefit of their own people.
Adrian Štuni, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you for clarification of many issues that are really important for Macedonia and the region as well. And I hope we will have another chance to discuss other issues as well.
You're welcome.
Това беше Адриан Štuni, експерт за меѓународна политика и безбедност, кој што вечерва за Заспиј ако можеш со нас разговараше од Вашингтон, каде што работи како меѓународен експерт. И благодарам и вам, почитувани гледачи, што бевте со Заспиј ако можеш. Останете со нас со програмата на Алфа и понатаму, а повторно се гледаме, се разбира, во следното издание на Заспиј ако можеш. Пријатна вечер.